Okay, so we're holding here in the Parsha Shir, and in this week's Parsha, I want to do a very interesting, very Yosef piece from the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, which historically we know that he was one of the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov himself. Actually, it's a whole interesting twist. His cipher is very lamdish. He was a very big Talmud Chacham before he became a Chassid. He was a Misnagid, in fact, at the beginning, and but he was a very big Talmud Chacham. And he came to Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov was able to convince him that his derech is the derech that he should follow. So his cipher, Toldos Yaakov Yosef, it was the first Chassidus cipher ever printed. And so this is like really, really close to Baal Shem Tov himself. It could be that we've done this piece before. I'm not sure which year. We've been doing these Parshas Chayei for several years already. It's a very Yisraelistic piece, so I would imagine that we might have done it at some point, but it's always good to go over because this is such a Yisoid, what he says here. This is like literally like the Yisoid of Yiddishkeit in a nutshell. It's very, very important. So let's start. So, okay, so those Yaakov Yosef tells us he's going to explain, we're going to see soon exactly how it connects to this week's Parsha, but he starts off with saying, we have to understand a Gemara in Makkas, where the Gemara says there's a famous Gemara, we've talked about it many times by the Shirim. The Gemara says, Omer Rab Simlui said, Taryag mitzvahs nitni leMoshe v'Sinai. Moshe Rabbeinu got Taryag mitzvahs on Har Sinai, and then he says v'chili. He doesn't explain everything, but then the Gemara says that different people in history sort of minimized it. From those Taryag mitzvahs, it got smaller and smaller into smaller and smaller numbers. Until finally it says, Bu Chavakik, then Chavakik came, Chavakik Hanuvi came, Vamidam al Achas, and he brought the whole Taryag mitzvahs down to one point. And what is that? Like it says in Sefer Chavakik, the tzaddik be'menusa yichid, the tzaddik lives with a minna. So it would seem to be that a minna is literally, and he's going to go through this here exactly how this is so, that a minna is in some way the point of all the mitzvahs. So he tells us, Vikfar Tamhi b'zei Yerabim v'Shleimim, there's many Rabbunim and many Mefarshim that struggled with this Gemara. Gibur Chavakik chas v'shulm negroya ha-mitzvahs, is Chavakik basically telling us to minimize the mitzvahs, as if the Taryag mitzvahs are not important, right? Because really, be'emes, lahavdil, chas v'shulam, to compare, but this is really what the Christians did, right? They basically said that all the mitzvahs in the Torah, all those are superfluous because all you have to have is that connection to God. You have to have that emunah, that faith. Right, and they're always talking about how faith is so important. It almost sounds like that type of an idea in a certain way, chas v'shulam. But this is what all the Mefarshim ask: is Chavak, and the other problem with this is, and this is where it's going to get into here. We're going to see a little bit of the Chassidim versus the Misnagdim here a little bit. That if you say that at a certain point, be it a minna, or be it like the Chassidim said dvaikis, which we're going to see in this piece is actually the same thing. Right, is the point of everything. So then a person could theoretically say, if I'm on that level, I don't need the mitzvahs themselves. And that's very dangerous, right? Because the whole Yiddishkeit is found upon the importance of the mitzvahs. Now, obviously, it can't be that the Gemara means that. Because the Gemara is devoted so many dafim, so many pages, so many long discussions in the Gemara about the mitzvahs, understanding exactly how to do each of the mitzvahs, being medayik from the psikim, bringing from Torah Shabbal Pei, from Halachol Moshe Sinai. They were obsessed, if you can say that word, with doing the mitzvahs exactly right. So it can't be that the Chazal mean over here that the mitzvahs aren't important as long as you have a minna. What does it mean? So he says v'yesh leimer. So there's a way to deal with this. He says, the Isa b'Mishnah Parag Daled de Uvas. It says in the Mishnah in Parag Daled in Pirkei Uvas. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, "Hois mitzvah achas kanelei praklit echad." Person does one mitzvah and he gets one protector. He gets one malach, kavyuchol. The mitzvah creates a malach that protects him. And someone who does one avayra, he acquires for himself one accuser. So the avayra creates a malach that's an accuser that accuses him. Right, that's what the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos. And so he says Va'inyan, and the deeper way to understand this is something that we've talked about many times by the Shirim, but here's a makor. Like a lot of times I say stuff by the Shirim because I've seen it in Sfurim, but I don't really know always exactly where it says. But here we're going to see the makor for one of these things that we've talked about many times. It says K'moshe Kosya Kadmoinim, as the previous generations of Mefarshim have explained. Sha'ain haschar v'hoinesh hismichi rak hachraichi. That schar v'hoinesh are not hismichi, are not something that is decided upon. Rak hachraichi, rather they are a direct continuation of the action itself. Meaning, right? That, for example, that we've talked about this many times, but like you have in law, in any country's law, the laws make sense. The laws are based upon that things should go in a safe manner, and people should be safe, and people shouldn't steal from each other, and so on and so forth. Obviously, all of it has a logical connotation, but a lot of these things are just things that are decided upon. In other words, the government decided that a red light means stop, and when you get to the red light, you have to stop your car. And if the person drives to the red light, the police officers are going to come over and give him a ticket. So now he is going to have to pay money or lose his car. I don't know exactly. There's different levels of that, right? But the idea is that they're getting the ticket and having to pay that money is not a direct result of driving through the red light. It's something that was decided upon, that someone who drives through a red light gets such a thing. That's what an oynish is. That's what a punishment is, so to speak. You're punished for something, but the punishment is not a direct continuation of what the person did. It's just the person did something that was wrong, so therefore he gets punished. And many people look at the schar and oynish in the Torah in that kind of a way. But al pi pnimis Torah, it's a mistake, right? So a lot of people look at it that way, that I do a mitzvah, Hashem likes the fact that I did the mitzvah, so he gives me something called schar. He gives me, a point in Shemayim. Right, and the converse, I do an avayra, I did something Hashem doesn't like, so Hashem's going to punish me for doing something that Hashem doesn't like. It's not the way it is. It's hachraichi. It's directly connected. like what I've said many times by the Shirim, as opposed to it being like driving to a red light and getting a ticket, it's more like that there's an electric fence and there's a sign that says electric fence do not touch, and the person comes over and touches the electric fence and gets zapped. Well, that's not a punishment for disobeying the sign, right? That's a direct result of the action that he did. So when the Torah tells us certain things are a virus, what the Torah is telling us is that those things have a negative energy. And therefore, when we do those things, we draw that negative energy upon ourselves. That's a direct result of the virus. The same thing would be the opposite with a mitzvah, right? That a mitzvah has a positive energy, positive koach that's associated with it. And when a person does a mitzvah, then he gets that. So that's what he explains here. K'nivrim in a mitzvah, that the mitzvah creates malach echad. The mitzvah creates a malach. A direct result of that mitzvah is that it creates a malach, a nikra praklit, which is called like a supporter, a helper, right? A positive malach. V'hi and that's why a person gets schar, why a person gets something good for the mitzvah, is a direct result of the mitzvah itself. The energy the mitzvah created, a malach, if you want to call it that, the mitzvah created, that is the direct result of the mitzvah, and that's his schar. And the same thing goes the other way within the Vaira. And he brings some psikim to support this. Because K'moshe Kusav, as it says, and he quotes Pusik in Yeshaya, where it says, Temoy gegenu biyad avinaini, that we're like grabbed, punished, hurt, biyad avinaini, through our avirus themselves. It doesn't say because we did a virus we get punished. It says the punishment is biyad avinaini. It comes from the avira itself. And it says K'moshe Kusav, and also like it says another Pusik in Yeshaya, Tesirchu ra'aschu, that your ra itself, your your negative action itself, your avodah itself, gives you yisirim, gives you suffering. It's not the suffering is something that is randomly given because Hashem randomly decided that since you did an avodah, you deserve a punishment. It's rather direct continuation. So it says in kind. So then it comes out that hamitzvah atzma hi amaitiv. The mitzvah itself is that which is giving that good positive hashpua to the person. And so too, the avodah itself is what punishes him, right? Yeah, okay, and so we could really go into this because there's questions on this, because Chazal say in the Gemara, Chazal say schar mitzvah b'hai al maleka, that in this world there is no the schar, and Pashtus also the punishment for avodas for the most part are not in this world. Now the reason why Chazal say that is because there's the classic problem of why do good things happen to bad people, why do bad things happen to good people. The simple answer to that question would be to say that schar and that ornish, that or that you're getting, that positive energy, that malach that you're getting for the mitzvah, it doesn't necessarily have an effect here in this world. It's going to be, when you get up there, when you get to the next level, over there, you're gonna get that, right? And the same thing is with an avodah. But in different places it does say, I mean, even in the Torah, certain mitzvahs are clearly, it clearly says that there's going to be something positive in this world. Kibbud avayim is a richus yomim, right? Shliach hakan, and certain avodas are described as being avodas in this world. At least according to some Mefarshim. Kuris, this a very abstract punishment of kuris that's brought in the Torah, literally means cutting off, right? Is for certain mitzvahs in the Torah says the Bezdin itself should execute a punishment for that avodah. In certain avodas, Bezdin doesn't do it. Something called kuris. Now, some people say the kuris also is in this world. It means the person will live a shorter life, or it means that you won't have children, or these different kinds of things. Now, the Parshas in Kabbalah we see differently. We see that kuris refers to a spiritual state of feeling cut off, of feeling separated from Kedusha and feeling separate from Hashem. But the truth is that even though it might be that it's true that the ikar schar, the main schar the person gets, is going to be in the next world, but ultimately it affects the person in this world too, because this world and the next world are not as separate as we like to make them, right? Because the next world is, and this world, it says that Olam Hazeh is just a reflection of Olam Haba. So therefore, if we say that, even if we say the ikar of the schar, or for the mitzvah, or the punishment for the avodah is going to be in the next world, that's going to directly affect this world type of situation as well. And that's why we see that even the question, why do good things happen to bad people? Well, maybe the bad people have a lot of material wealth, perhaps. You could have like a mafia boss or something who's wallowing around in money. But is he happy? Does he feel positive? Does he feel connected to Hashem? Does he feel dvaikus, which is the goal of everything? No, because the fact that he's doing evil things is giving him a negative energy. Whether he has physical material, the material possessions are not the point. Right, or if a good person gets an illness, if a good person loses his money or whatever it might be, that's only the chitzonius, right? But inside, a person who's a good person who's doing mitzvahs and masim tovim and who's connected to Hashem and who's working towards the dvaikas is going to be happy, right? Even if the external situation is negative. So therefore, the real answer to the question is, why do good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people? Is things are chitzonius, things are external, things are not the point. The point is how connected does the person feel to rachnius, which is really the only thing that really brings true simcha, because we know that physical possessions don't bring simcha. And we know that people that pursue physical possessions, physical pleasures, right, they get nowhere, because it never gives them a state of satisfaction. It always gives them a craving for more, right? And this goes with everything, with money, with sexual pleasure, with drugs, every single one of these things that supposedly is going to make the person feel good is only going to want him to have more and more and more and more and more. And he's never going to feel good. He's actually going to feel like he's running this rat race. We're just running, like the gerbil or the rat in the wheel, just running around and getting nowhere. Right? So ultimately, the schar does have hashpua down here too, and the avayra and the oynish for the avayra also has hashpua here too. But let's understand this idea that it's called a malach, because we've been talking about it more in an abstract sense. There's some kind of a or, some kind of an energy, a positive or negative, whatever it might be, that comes down. But the Mishnah Pirkei Avos calls it a malach. So let's understand that. So he says, "Al kain malach hanivrim in a mitzvah achas." So then it comes out that the malach that's created from one mitzvah, he koim shleima or mach ivrim v'shesugidim rochniim. A malach, by definition, right? If we want to really get down to what a malach is really whether it has a separate consciousness. It seems to have a separate consciousness to a certain extent, not as much as we do. Because remember that the higher up in the oilamos things are, the more everything is oneness, and the further down we go, the more things are separate. So down here in the olam hagashmi, we feel totally separate. Usually, right? We're working towards dvaikas, towards that feeling of feeling connected. But the pashtus of it, the way that the world looks and the way the world seems to be running, is that we're totally separate. Now the maluchim seem to, in a certain sense, be separate too, because the maluchim have different names, right? You have Michul, Gavriel, Raful, Iriel, and these maluchim are the way we see them in Tanakh. They manifest in some sort of a humanoid form. It seems to be, because. And sometimes even literally in a human type of a form, because we were talking by what's it called, by the Oichus Chaim Chassidus, we were talking about Izan Azul were these maluchim that challenged Hashem before the Mabul and said, you basically said to Hashem, you messed up, you created this human being that's supposed to make a tikkun, and instead he's doing the opposite. And they said, so send us down and we're gonna show you what we could do in the physical world. And what happened was they came down and they married human women and they had these giants and they taught people kishuf and all these different things that the Zohar Kodesh says about them, and the Sefer Chanoich, all these different sfurim that talk about it, say about them. But the question is, how does a malach, which is an entity that is not physical, mate with a woman and have a child? So obviously, al korchach, you have to say. And when they came down to the physical world, they took physical material bodies, right? It must be. And the same thing we see in last week's parsha. We see the three maluchim came to Avram, and it talks about them that they're anushim, they're people, they look like people. By Avram, it doesn't say clearly if he knew they were maluchim or not, but there's different medushim and Chazal that say he did know. Parshas in the Psikim, it doesn't look like that he knew, because at least not at first for sure, because he was telling them, wash your feet, because they were afraid that they're worshiping, they worship the dust, and there's dust that's avoid the zura on their feet. Right afterwards, the Medrashim say that maybe he didn't know. Loit, it says he didn't know. So in other words, they're manifesting as human beings, literally, right? They're taking human forms when they come down to this world. Because you can't take a Yitzira entity like a Malach. Yitzira is an oilam that's not physical at all. It has certain properties that correspond to different properties in the physical world. That's we talk about these different haichulas, these different palaces there, and these different rakias, and so on and so forth. So we talk about it as if it's a physical type of a structure. But then again, in Kabbalah, we talk about Atzilus also as if it's a physical type of a structure, but we know that that's not what it means, because there is no physical space in these oilamis. So Malach is an entity that's completely and totally nothing like anything physical. But it seems to have somewhat of a separate consciousness, because they speak and they decide things. The Gemara says in one place, the Gavil one time disobeyed Hashem. Even these Izan Azul, right? That they ended up disobeying Hashem and going against Hashem. You see that they have some sort of a separate consciousness, but it's not the same as us. Their consciousness is still more connected to Hashem. That's really the answer to why sometimes some places it says the Malachim do have Bechira, sometimes it says they don't have Bechira, is because they sort of have Bechira, because they're sort of separate, but they're much closer to that oneness. So because of that, it's almost like they don't have a Bechira. if a person's dovek to Hashem and is dovek to that oneness, and so then he doesn't have an independent, doesn't make independent decisions. It all comes from what's the roots in Hashem, kiviyuchel, right? So by the malachim it'll be even more so. But the point is that the malach is at least is described as an entity, and if it's an entity, and if it's an entity that is humanoid, whatever that means in Yitzira, right, then it's going to correspond to a human being. And so just like a human being has Ramach Ivrim Shesu Gidim, right, right, the limbs and the sinews that a person has. So these malachim are going to have that type of a structure too, except that it's not a physical structure. That's why he says that these malachim that are created from the mitzvahs have Ramach Ivrim Shesu Gidim, but they're Rachniim. It's Rachnis. It's not physical. But his point over here is, okay, he's going to explain. We have to understand this. One mitzvah made a malach, that's Ramach Ivrim Shesu Gidim. Eich Nivra, how could it be that there was created mitzvah achas from one mitzvah, she kneged Iver Echad Shabudam, which is only kneged one limb of a person? What does that mean? It says, like it says in Shas, the Makkas, also in Makkas, Ramach mitzvahs essay kneged Ramach Iver Shabudam says the Ramach mitzvahs essay, the 248 positive mitzvahs kneged those 248 limbs in a person, and conversely the Shasu, the 365 lois essay kneged the 365 sinews in the person. Right, so then it comes out that really one mitzvah is only connected one part of the person. So what he's asking here is, how could it be from one mitzvah an entire malach is created? An entire malach seems to be as if it contains all the mitzvahs because it has Ramach Ivrim and Shesu Gidim, right? So how could from one mitzvah come out an entire malach? Now, for those of them learning Pnimius Torah, this question doesn't bother us very much because we're aware of the fact that Komash Kalash Beprat. So obviously, every single one mitzvah is going to contain within it a subset, a microcosm of the entire Torah. And that's really the side of how we find all these different places that Chazal talk about different mitzvahs as if they're connected the whole Torah, which is very interesting. Right, that's interesting in and of itself. Does that mean that if a person does that one mitzvah, it's as if he fulfilled the whole Torah, so he doesn't have to do the other mitzvahs? Of course not. But what it means to say is that in every mitzvah, but clearly is there's beprat, there's the entire mitzvahs are there. So you see this like in some of the Yerutzins that we say like before we put on before we put on the Toldos and the Baruch Nafshi over there. It says over there, v'tareg mitzvahs aklilim ba, all the tareg mitzvahs that are included within the mitzvah of tzitzis. The mitzvah of tzitzis in a way is special in that way. But still, every mitzvah really be'emes includes all of the mitzvahs. So really, the question is not such a question. One mitzvah is going to create a malach. It's going to contain the entirety of all the mitzvahs in a microcosm. But he's going to go with a little bit of a different approach here. So he says, so again, he asks the question again, nivra the mitzvah achas. How could you have from one mitzvah, Ramach Ivrim, which is only one of the Ramach Ivrim, that mitzvah corresponds to only one of the limbs, malach b'chol tzis Ramach Ivrim, the malach that has the entirety of everything. So he says like this. So we could say, ha-mitzvah b'ha-minah shleimer, if he does that mitzvah with a minna, and we're going to explore soon what that means exactly. Shaldai asiyas mitzvah zi yiskla dabek boyis burach, which through that he's going to be able to, through this mitzvah, be duvik to Hashem. Okay, we're going to see in a second. Okay, we might as well talk about it now because it sort of goes into a sort of a side point. Basically, what he's telling us over here is a min is equivalent to dvaikus. That's basically what he's telling us. And so obviously we're going to have to refine our definition of a minute. So of course it's still true, and we can't minimize the pushata minute that that everyone has, that a person believes in Hashem and he believes in Hashem's existence. Be'emes, Rabbi Kiva Tatz was talking about this, but if anyone heard when he spoke on Monday, he was sort of talking about this, that the idea of a minna really as belief, right, is really not an accurate way of understanding it, because he said, like if a person, like if if I tell you, I think the example he used was, if I tell you that my suit is green, it's not, it's black, right? If I tell you it's green, I tell you to believe in it, you can't believe in it because it's not true, right? If I tell you my suit is black, you don't have to believe in it because it's not, because the suit is black, right? This sort of goes into this whole idea that the Rambam says, that we have a mitzvah to not just to sort of believe in a theoretical sense in the existence of Hashem. It has to be, we have to know it. V'yidata hayom, right? Should know this day that Hashem is God. So really, be'emes, but that's not to minimize the fact that the amina pshita, the simple amina that simple Eden have, is a tremendous thing, because that's not, the ladies or whoever it might be. I'm just, some ladies do in Primus at Torah, but I'm saying, the people that just do things simply, and they believe in Hashem, and they devote their lives to Hashem. They're doing the mitzvahs, and they're holding themselves back from a virus because of that strong belief they have in Hashem. That's not to be minimized, Chas v'shulim. The Baal Shem Tov emphasized the fact that the simple person's avodah sometimes is on a tremendous level, with that simple belief that he has, even though it's simplistic, right? But ultimately that person could be very, very close to Hashem on the level that he's on. But the Talmidei Baal Shem, the close circle, right, were deeper thinkers. So what he's telling us over here is that the mitzvah of minna ultimately at the end is really dvaikus. Because a minna at its core level is not just awareness that Hashem exists. It's an awareness that Hashem is everything, and everything that happens from Hashem, everything that happens is from Hashem. So therefore, there's no such thing as a bad thing happening. Everything that happens is good because everything is from Hashem. When a person lives on that level of that type of an awareness and that type of a knowledge that everything is a likis, and this situation right now, exactly the way it is a likis, right? Whether my ego, my separate self, is enjoying it, whether my separate self is suffering, that's not to minimize the fact that we do have to have empathy for our individual selves and their problems and their challenge and the challenges that we have, and those of others, of course, right? But on a certain level, when a person has that awareness of the oneness of all things, which really is dvaikus is that awareness. Like we always said, dvaikus is not something to be achieved. That the person gets to dvaikus, the person gets to that awareness that it was always that way, right? That everything was always one, except it's living in that mindset, living in that awareness, and not just theoretical, but actually experiencing it that way. Right. So that ultimately is the amina. And when a person is able to connect to the mitzvah in that type of a way, then that mitzvah will be coiled the entire Torah, just like we just said that amina is coiled the entire Torah. So in other words, one person could come to the mitzvah, let's say davening shacharis in the morning. One person, I'm sure there's more than one, unfortunately. I'm sure there's many people that wake up in the morning and they're like, "Oh, I have to daven shacharis again. I have to do it. I'm going to feel guilty if I don't, so I'm going to do it." Okay, and they schlep out of bed and they schlep the shil and they daven. Right. So that person, he did a mitzvah, and he's getting schar. He created a malach. Right. It's also not to be minimized, especially if the harder it is, the fim tzara agra, the harder it is, the more schar a person gets. But at the same time, that mitzvah was done not with dvaikus. That mitzvah was done with like, this is an obligation I have to do it. Not that I want to, not that I'm excited about it, I just have to because I'm Jewish, so this is what I do. Right? Doing a mitzvah dvaikus means the person approaches the mitzvah with awareness that everything is a likis. And the mitzvahs are opportunities to connect to a likis in a more powerful way. if you learn Pnimis Torah and you learn, what the mitzvahs mean and what they're actually doing in Shemaim on higher levels, it's all that more meaningful. But even if you don't know exactly what they're doing, they're doing something tremendous, right? Because I can tell you, if you want to summarize the entire Shar Kavunas in one line, it's that every single mitzvah that we do and every word of the tefillah, there's tremendous things going on. A person comes without awareness, and with that awareness that this is a way to connect to Elikis, and he feels that excitement about that mitzvah, then that person has that amina, has that dvaikus, and then the person really got to a very high level through that one mitzvah. He really connected the entire Torah into all the mitzvahs in the Torah, even beklal. Forget the fact that I mentioned before that every mitzvah beprat has within it the entire Torah. But since the entire Torah is amina, which is dvaikus, we're going to see in a second, he's going to say, then the idea is that he literally connects to everything when he does one single mitzvah, right? And so that's that side of how he can create with one mitzvah malach as an entire set of all entire parts of the body, right? Because what's it called? Because really he's connecting to everything. So he says, "Kamosha Kusav," like the Pusik says, "Iboy tidbak." Right? The Pusik says we should. It's almost like phrased as a mitzvah. You should be dovek to him. And he says, "K'shi tachlis kol Torah of mitzvahs." He says, "This is the tachlis. This is the goal of all the Torah and all the mitzvahs." And of course, the Misnagdim would jump on this and would start screaming, right? Because this was what the Misnagdim didn't like. They wanted that they said that if you say that, again, like we mentioned before, if you say that dvaikus is the tachlis of all of the mitzvahs in the entire Torah, the person could theoretically say, if I'm at dvaikus, I don't need the mitzvahs in the Torah anymore. And they were afraid the Chassidim are going in that direction, right? And they emphasized the opposite. They emphasized that dvaikus is if a person does the mitzvahs because he wants to get to dvaikus, or he davens because he wants to get to dvaikus, that's not lishma. Doing a mitzvah lishma means doing it literally because Hashem commanded it, and not for some ulterior motive, right? This was the big difference between the way the Hasidim looked at it and the Misnagdim looked at it. What did the Misnagdim do with a boy sidbak? They should be duvik to Hashem. It says beferish and pusik. It's phrased as a mitzvah. It's not one of the Targum mitzvahs, I don't think, in any enumeration of them, but it's phrased in that way. We're being told, the boy sidbak, you should be duvik to him. So what did the Misnagdim do with that? So they go to the Ma'amar Chazal. The Ma'amar Chazal says, how can you duvik to Hashem? If Hashem is a consuming fire, and you can't really be duvik to Hashem. This is what the Gemara says, right? The Gemara comes out like the Misnagdim. The Gemara says, what does it mean to be duvik to Hashem? You can't be duvik to Hashem. Aish oichlahi is a consuming fire. So then it says, it means to be duvik to his midas, to emulate his midas. But we've seen the Zohar Kodesh. The Zohar Kodesh didn't like that at all, right? Because the Zohar Kodesh actually dealt with this a few weeks ago. We had the Zohar Kodesh dealt with this idea of Dvaikus and Boy Tidbak, and how can you do it to a consuming fire? And Zohar said, yeah, there is this mamar that says Hadar Gemara, but the Zohar didn't agree with that, right? What do we do with how the Zohar says differently than the Gemara? I'm not sure. Maybe it could be both. Of course, there's an avoid of emulating Hashem's midas. We're not denying that. The whole Torah Devorah, right? For those that learn Torah Devorah, is based upon the idea of being dovik to Hashem's midas. But at the same time, there is a higher bechin of dvaikus too. The Zohar says beferish there. How can you be dovik to aish oichla, to consuming fire? Well, if the neshama of a yid is fire, when you bring a little fire to a big fire, the big fire doesn't consume it. Right, the fire only consumes matter; it doesn't consume energy. So if our neshamas, our energy, our fire, then when we're dovek to Hashem, then the same thing happens. Like when you bring a little candle towards a big bonfire, right? That fire becomes absorbed in the big fire. It loses its individual, independent existence, but it wasn't destroyed. So Zohar says, no, dvaikus means to get to that level of total absorption in Hashem, kiviyuchol, which then comes out like the Chassidim. What the Misnagdim do with that Zohar, I don't know. But interestingly enough, he brings down over here he brings down actually some supports from Rishonim for this idea that Dvaikus is the tachlis of the whole Torah, and which is and I think the reason why he's stressing the point is to sort of prove it to the Misnagdim, because the Misnagdim would say, you can see them are making up stuff. Bring us a source. So he's bringing sources. It says K'mosh Kusiv HaMefarish LaRambam. He says that there's a parish on the Rambam in Hilchos Yisod HaTorah that says like this. And basically what it says over there, this is in Parak Bais in Hilchos Yisod HaTorah in the Rambam. It says allusion like this. It says, "V'loy nitni kol hamitzvos elu kedai shenegia bohem lezi hamadraiga." He's talking about Ahavas Hashem, which I guess those that give us understanding that that's the same as Dvaikus. But listen, he says that the mitzvahs are only given in order to get to this level. Like it says, "Becharta b'chaim leman tichye." It says that you should choose life, which means choose the Torah. Leman tichye, you should live. Lahava es Hashem. Right? That's what the Pusik says in Devurim. So you see that it's saying that the reason why we should choose life, the reason why we should choose the Torah, ultimately is Lahava es Hashem. So it seems to be that the Rambam himself is saying that that's the goal, that there's some kind of a goal of the mitzvahs that's beyond the mitzvahs themselves. He doesn't call it Dvaikus, he calls it Lahava, but I guess understanding it, it's the same thing. And then he also brings K'mosh Kusav HaChused Hanal, says like the Chused says, which he means the Yavitz, Yaakov Emden, where he says, where he has allusion, where he says Iboy Sidbak, that idea of that you should be dovek to Hashem. He pre kol had Torah. This is the fruit of the whole Torah. Meaning, in other words, the Torah is like the tree, like where the fruit grows from. But we know that the point of the tree is the fruit, right? So the fruit of the Torah is Iboy Tidbak, is Dvaikus. Okay? So we see very clearly that this idea that the Dvaikus ultimately is the goal. Imkain, he says. And by the way, so then what happens to that concern that the Misnagdim had? That a person can say, well, I got to Dvaikus, so I don't need the Torah anymore, right? The answer to that is that ultimately, this is going to sound crazy, okay? Ultimately, it's true. That's why Chazal tell us in many different places, in the Zohar Kudish and in Medrushim. I don't know if it's mentioned in the Gemara itself, but there's going to be this idea that when Mashiach comes, there's not going to be any mitzvahs anymore. There's an idea like that. The Gemara also mentions certain specific mitzvahs. Like the Gemara says, the reason why a chazir, a pig is called chazir, which is from the allusion to return, because it'll return to be kosher when Mashiach comes. Then you have this idea, famous idea that all the Yom Tovim will come butel except Purim, right? But the Zohar Kodesh says much more openly that literally there won't be mitzvahs anymore at all. There's a whole discussion in Sfurim. According to that, what's this whole idea of the third Beis HaMikdash? There's no mitzvahs, there's no karbonos. Why are you Beis HaMikdash? There's different answers to the question, but ultimately we see that in a certain way, the mitzvahs are only for a specific period of time. When we get to tikkun, to complete tikkun, because the whole point of the mitzvahs, right, is the mitzvahs are doing tikkun, raising up nitzoitzes, they're building up zah, which was broken by the shviras during the shviras HaKailim, and so we're repairing that. Once everything's repaired, the repairmen are working on the house. The house is in shambles, so they're working on it. And it takes them quite a while. Now, once they're done fixing the house is fixed. What do they do now? They don't need to. There's nothing more to fix. It's done, right? So really, be'emes, when we get to that true, complete, entire dvaikus that we're going to have when Mashiach comes, it's true that we've gotten to the goal. And of course, we know there's goals after that. Because it doesn't mean the Torah will become butul, because we know that the Torah ain't a mechlefus, the Torah doesn't change, the Torah stays the same. We'll always have the Torah, but the mitzvahs will then be in a different we don't even understand what this means. We'll be in a different fashion, a different way, a different expression, because then we're going to be working on being Masak in different things, the Acharaim of Ab Ve'ima, and then Arich and Atik, and going all the way up. But the idea is so the answer to the question, why can't the person say I got to Dvaikas, I don't need the Torah, is because any Dvaikas that we get to at this point in time, by definition, because Zah is not complete, so any Dvaikas we get to at this time will only be a partial Dvaikas. And there's always a deeper Dvaikas and a different Dvaikas and a higher Dvaikas the person can still get to. So, and for that, you still need the mitzvahs and you still need the Torah, right? So that's really the answer. Anyway, so he says, so if a person is able to be mekasher, to connect, and to be medabek, to cleave, to attach his mind, boy Yisburach, to Hashem Yisburach. And it's interesting that he's saying his mind, machshavtoi, and not l'mushal nafsho or nishmusai, which we would think it's more than the shumat's being dovik to Hashem, but he's emphasizing it's the machshava. That's not coincidental either, because on the level of the neshama itself, the dvaik, like we said, dvaikus is just realizing that we're realizing that we're in dvaikus. We're always in dvaikus, right? So the neshama itself is always dovik to Hashem. But the problem is that the neshama itself is a reality that we know of, but it doesn't. But we don't really have so much of an awareness of it, right? In other words, like we mentioned in the shir recently, the neshama is not something that occupies any physical space in the body, and it's not your mind either, right? It's something that is behind the scenes, that's in a different dimension, so to speak. It's causing that the cells of your body are alive. The greatest mystery of science, right? Origin of life. How does non-living matter become living, right? And the neshama is almost like a concept. It's like a verb. It's a pe'ila. It's an action that's taking place within the physical world. Then you have the mind, right? The mind is who we are, right? And that mind is of course very much connected to the neshama, because the neshama is what's allowing that mind to be. But at the same time, the mind itself and the thoughts and the ideas and the feelings and experiences the mind is having are not the neshama by itself. They're in the brain, right? Which is how the neshama manifests, so to speak, within the human being. So because of that, the idea is not to make the neshama dovik to Hashem, because the neshama is always dovik to Hashem. The point is to make the mind, to make our self the way we know it, dovik to Hashem, right? So that's an important point. But he says that if a person is able to get to that level, to be medabek as a machshava to Hashem, im kain kol mach iver shesu gidav geriren achra machshava. Then it comes out when he gets to that dvaikus, then his body too will be pulled after that. Because as we know, the body is just an extension of the machshava. Like we talked about, we saw this in the Gru, we talked about it, it came up recently, came in the Safed Tznius shir, I think. It came yesterday in the Safed Tznius shir, it came up, this idea that the mind itself is essentially very much attached to and fused to the body, and the body cooperates with the mind because it's an extension of the mind. And that's why, even though, like we said yesterday, even though scientifically speaking, in order for me to move my finger, my brain has to send a signal to the nerves in my finger and tell them to move, right? But we don't think of it that way. We don't think of it, we don't like say, brain, send the signal to finger, please. Okay, there you go. It just you move your finger. It's one, right? So the idea is that if a person's mind is dovik to Hashem, it's going to follow that his body is going to be two. It says, "K'moshe shamati befirish mipi moiri b'mokam ache and b'mokam shechoshe v'hudam sham hikiloi." He brings from what's it called, from the Baal Shem Tov, an idea. The Baal Shem Tov always said that wherever a person's mind is, that's where he is, and he's connected to this idea. And the idea really is a very, very deep idea, because really what the Baal Shem Tov is saying doesn't mean where the person's mind is, that's where he is. It means that we have to sort of redefine the way we look at reality. Okay? Because the way we look at reality is like this. We look at reality that the information that's coming through our senses is real. So the world that I see around me when I look around and what I hear, that's real. And if I close my eyes and I think about myself on a beach with palm trees, that's not real, because that's just in my mind. But really, be'emes. I'm not saying that the physical world doesn't have an objective existence. That there is a philosophical position like that. But it's all subjective. It's all being experienced by the mind. Sometimes people ask me, people ask me if I have a very deep meditational experience, and I have a very profound type of an insight that came in a meditation, is that real or is that not real? Or nowadays people are busy with all these, the world is getting very interesting. People are saying that if I take whatever psychedelic mushrooms or whatever it might be, and I see something, is that real? Is it not real? People have asked me these kinds of questions. So I always tell them, what's real, what's not real? If it's real to you, it's real, right? Because all experience is subjective. And so what the Baal Shem Tov is saying, what the person's mind is, that's where he is because the mind is really just receiving different types of information. Some of it might be from external sources, like from the eyes and from the ears, and some of it might be from internal sources, where the mind itself is creating a reality inside inside the brain, inside the mind. But there's no difference, because it's all just the mind experiencing something, right? It's a little scary for us, because then it totally turns upside down our whole way of understanding reality. But ultimately, that's the way it is. And then this is going to go into the whole idea that we always talked about many times, that since the mind is experiencing experiences, so if the mind is able to alter the way those experiences are experienced, it will experience them differently. I don't know if that made sense. Like, for example, if let's say a person, he drinks a l'chaim, or 2 or 3, right? So now he's experiencing the world in a different type of a way. That's also external, because it was like an external substance that affected the way the way his mind is experiencing it. But for him at that point, that is his reality, right? So in the same way, if we can change without resorting to alcohol or outside substances or anything, if we can change the way we think and the way we look at the world, then the world will be in a positive way. The world will be a much brighter place. Who says that being stuck in traffic has to be bad? Who said that's bad? Maybe it's great. It depends on how you look at it, right? With some things it's harder, with physical pain, with suffering, with anxiety, depression. I'm not saying the person should follow his doctor's instructions and his psychologist's instructions in these types of situations, but at the same time, really be'emes, since the experience is in the mind, so therefore wherever the person's mind is, that's where he is. So put yourself in a good place, and then you'll be in a good place, right? That's really what the Baal Shem Tov boils down to. But it starts summarizing, because it's getting late. And I really wanted to see how it gets to the parsha. And also there's one more really big, huge thing that he says. Kitzer, so he says, so that's what it means. The Chavakik says that all the mitzvahs are Tzaddik ben Musa Yichir, come down to a minna. He says it's because when every mitzvah is done with a minna, then that mitzvah is essentially brings the person to Dvaikas. When he's in Dvaikas, he's connected to everything. So he's connected to all the mitzvahs. He's connected to Hashem, which is the source of the mitzvahs. So everything is one. Okay. So then he says, the next idea is, but why does it say tzaddik b'minusa yichye over there in Chavakik? We understand a person should get to the level of a minna, but why tzaddik? So he explains like this. L'chaim b'mishnah says there's a mishnah in Parak Vov of Neguim. The mishnah is talking about different tsaras and different types of timas in different places in the body. And it calls the Mukma Bris Roish HaGviyah. So we've talked about the tip. It's talking in the mission about the tips of different parts of the body, the fingertips and so on and so forth. And it adds the Roish HaGviyah, the top of the Mukma Bris. So interestingly enough, we have this idea there that that the gvia, the mukama bris, it's called gvia first of all, which really means body. And we've talked about this before in the shirim. The reason why the euphemism for the mukama bris is body is because literally it's a microcosm of the entire body. And of course, when a person is mizavek and he transmits his entire essence through those drops of zera, right? Every single one of those sperm cells contains his entire essence, his entire buildup, his entire DNA in each one of those, right? So really is nichel the whole person. But he says over here a really powerful thing. He says the reason why it's called Rosh HaGvia is because really be'emes, in a certain sense, dvaikus is really a experience that's like an intimacy type of an experience, except of course on a totally spiritual level. Okay, but it's that kind of a thing. Just like when a person understands that when he gets to that point, that point of orgasm, right? He's for a few seconds, he's totally brutal. He ceases to exist, right? He's in a totally different place. It's a totally different realm, totally different oilam. Except it's only for a few seconds, right? But it's a dvaikus experience, and dvaikus will be sort of related to that in a certain sense. So he says, it says the same thing in the Arizal, the kavunas 10 tal mutar, the kavunas of 10 tal mutar that we say in Shmona Esrei, says the mutar is gematir remach. He says that's yisoid of za, and the yisoid of za is koil the entire remach. So yisoid is called gvia. Yisoid is koil the entire remach ivrim of the body, just like dvaikus is koil all the mitzvahs. So yisoid, zivig, intimacy will be connected to dvaikus, right? Very, very interesting. And the truth is that we could also say that between a person and his wife, when a person is at that moment of intimacy, that is dvaikus too. It's not dvaikus to Hashem. I mean, it is on a certain level, but it's dvaikus between these two people. So we understand that it's related to dvaikus. So then he says over here a very powerful thing. Im kain b'zei tuvin. So with this you can understand. Eich al dai hamina v'dvaikus v'tanig shenikra yisoid. And through pleasure, which is called yisoid, that's what all these things are synonymous. Amina, dvaikus, and pleasure, and that's really powerful, really, really powerful. Of course, we have to understand that the pleasure is a relative term, because we're not talking here about physical pleasure, right? Because physical pleasure is fleeting and temporary, and often has a crash or a downside to it, right? A person might like to drink, and he might like to feel good when he drinks, but then after that he has a hangover and he has a headache, right? Every type of and even with intimacy type things, like chas shulam, zer levatula, right? Even a goy, even somebody who doesn't have a hashkofa that it's wrong, ask anybody. They after that they feel down. It's a mitzias, right? It's because any physical pleasure is fleeting, and once it's gone, then the person feels empty because he felt something good and now it's gone, right? That's why what the pleasure that we're looking for is not a temporary pleasure which is going to disappear. We're looking for a pleasure that is going to be sort of always there, right? And that's dvaikus. That's why the mitzvahs are arranged in such a way that we have all these different mitzvahs that we do throughout the day. It's not to stress us out. We have so many obligations. It's so many opportunities and so many reminders. Every time you sit down to eat, every time you eat any little thing, make a bracha on the food that you eat, right? You're constantly going back to dvaikus, to Hashem, to this world is transient, and this world isn't the goal, and the goal is dvaikus to Hashem. Every mitzvah is a reminder of that. And every mitzvah, if it's done mindfully, it can get a person that dvaikus. And therefore, that tanig, that joy, is not some fleeting physical pleasure which lasts for a few seconds or hours or whatever the pleasure might be, and then cause a person to crash and suffer afterwards. But it's something that continues, right? So then he says, okay, whatever. He goes into the second point here, which I'm going to skip because he goes into a diak in the Gemara over there about mitzvahs, but I want to get to just how it fits into the parsha, Okay, so now to the parsha, because we saw we talked about this whole, we built up this whole idea, but we haven't yet put it into the parshas. Now, in the last paragraph, what he says is like this. With this you can understand. In this book, it says, "Vavruam zukain buba yuman." Right, in this parsha, it says Avrum was a zukan, he was old. Buba yom, he came in days. That's the literal translation, which really just means that he came to a long life, many days. But he says, right to learn, this means to say, essay, Avruam. In this pusik is Merim is Remach mitzvahs essay and Shesum mitzvahs lois essay. The word Avruam is Gematria Remach, as we know, right? That's why we say that Hashem added the high into his name, because after the Bris Milah, because after Bris Milah, he already had now all the mitzvahs. So now he became Gematria Remach, right? Because he had the mitzvah of Milah too. So Avruam goes on the Remach mitzvahs essay. And then when it says Avruam Zukan Bu Bayomim, so Bayomim, that means the Shesu Mitzvahs, the 365 lois essays, because Yomim means days, and that's connected Yomim Shem Shesu. That's the days of the year, which is 365, at least the solar year, right? So the Bu Bayomim, it goes on the Mitzvahs lois essay. So when it says Avruam Bu Zukan Bu Bayomim, you have in that Remus idea that Avruam was Dovid to all the mitzvahs of the Torah. But then it says after that, Yosef Lezei, Hashem Barech Avram Bakol. And it says Hashem blessed Avram with everything. So what are we saying? Since Avram was doing the mitzvahs, and the mitzvahs bring him to Dvaikis, therefore Barech Avram Bakol, Hashem Barech Avram Bakol, Hashem blessed Avram with everything, with the entirety of all of existence, because now he's at that level of Dvaikis. He's completed, so to speak, the entire structure of all their mitzvahs. He's gotten to that level of Dvaikus. So now he's Bekol, he's everything. He has everything. What does mean he has everything? Did he own China? He didn't own China, but it doesn't matter, because you don't have to own China. The ego self doesn't have to own China to own everything, because the ego self realized that it's part of the oneness of everything. So it is everything. So it owns everything. Not the ego self, the real, the true self, the aspect of us that's Dovid to Hashem. He says, and he says, so that's what it means. Bakol shezuchel liyisoid chavakik. They got to that yisoid of chavakik. She achas hakoil hakol, because Chavakik said amina devaikis tanik. That is koil everything behind amina. It says ki Avruam hoya roish hamamina, because we know that Avruam was an expert in amina. Like it says in the Pusik before, in last week's parsha, the two parshas ago, that he was mammon b'Hashem. So he was a mammon. He was on that level of a minute. He was on that level of dvaikus. So that's why he was barich bakol. He had everything, because dvaikus means dvaikus to Hashem, and since Hashem is everything, so this means dvaikus to everything. Therefore, any mitzvah that Avram ever did was koil all of them. So then it really would be that since Aram, in some sort of a way, not in the way that we did, but because I'll say he was Mekayim all the Tayag mitzvahs, so it was really Mekayim 613 times 613, because he was Mekayim each of them, but each of them includes all of them if he does it with a minna. Of course, Aram did it with a minna, so therefore he was doing to all the mitzvahs 613 times 613, the klal and the prat and everything. And that's the Brucha Yisayra, Hashem Baruch Hazram Bakol, which is the idea of getting to that oneness. Understand this well. So that's the piece. So it's a very nice piece. Baruch Hashem, it's very beautiful, and I hope that that everyone gained from it. And just wanted to wish everyone a wonderful Shabbos. If you're in Thornhill, some people are here are from Thornhill, some are not. But if you're in Thornhill, Rav Maimon, there's a very special Breslov Mashpia. He's going to be by Rabbi Gisselson. And I sent an email before with the schedule. If you want to come to one of his things, very nice thing. He's speaking Sunday in Shavim Maim. I'm probably going to go to that, but it's 8 o'clock, so we could still give the Zohar share afterwards, I think. But anyway, have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos, everyone, and Shabbat Shalom. Shalom. Bez Hashem, we'll see you next year.
Good night.
Good night.